It's interesting that you put it like a puzzle because I think, okay, there's these challenges, and you can either, it's so much about your mindset. I can either be like, oh, this is going to be horrible. I don't want to do this. Or I can say, how can I uniquely solve this really weird problem that doesn't seem to have a solution, but I'm going to do it, and then see it as like a puzzle rather than as a inconvenience or like a nightmare or just an unsolvable problem. And I try to, when I start getting frustrated about something, I'm like, okay, how can I reframe this as an interesting problem to solve rather than as a nuisance?
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
If you're looking for help with ultrasound scanning, whether that's choosing a new machine or developing your ultrasound skills, check out the First Opinion Veterinary Ultrasound website at fovu.co.uk for independent machine reviews and online and in-person teaching options. FOVU, simplifying ultrasound.
Hey everyone, I am beyond excited today to have one of my best friends on the show today. We have Dr. Jessica Fragola or Fragola, depending on how you'd like to pronounce it, and that means strawberry in Italian. And I'm just super excited because Jess is one of my best friends. We went to vet school together. Before vet school, she was a history major at Harvard. We go way back. She is literally the reason that I passed epidemiology and public health in vet school. Because that stuff just doesn't come naturally to me, and she just, basically taught me everything by hand in vet school. Parasitology, she helped me with EKGs, there are some very, very specific parts of my own veterinary education that I personally attribute to Dr. Fragola. I did get a C in public health in vet school, but it would have been an F if it weren't for Jess. We've worked together on a publication that we submitted together to New Zealand Journal of Veterinary Medicine. So we're co-published together. And I'm so excited to have her here today, especially because she launched her in-home euthanasia practice February 2022, Paws at Peace out of New York City. And I'm just so proud of her. And, her business just took off right away. It's really, really cool. And just welcome, Jess. I call her Fraggle Rock. Can I call you Fraggle Rock in the show?
Anyone can call me Fraggle Rock. It's my preferred name, actually.
Yay!
And I'm pretty sure neither of us would have passed parasitology if it weren't for that giant hookah that we smoked while we were studying. And it was like that cafe we would meet at and just like pronounce worm names weird, like strut.
Strategy.
It just evolved into inside jokes then.
Yeah, but we'll try and not devolve into too many inside jokes, but some of them are just too good. We did. I forgot about that hookah that we smoked to study for parasitology. It made it a lot more bearable. That's hilarious. So, welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe. I wanted to start out the episode with the question that I always start out with. What is your favorite snack to eat in the car? If you eat in the car on the way to IHE cases.
I love eating in the car. I mean, I eat with the dead bodies in the car. So no. Sometimes it's a little smelly in the car, but we all ate right after anatomy lab. So you understand the like, it's gross, but you're still hungry vibe.
Yes.
I love eating in the car. It's like my favorite place to eat. And my favorite thing to eat is a bacon, egg, and cheese on an everything bagel. And I eat one of those almost every day. And it's so yummy. It's not really a snack. It's usually my breakfast.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds delicious and wholesome. And it's good you have breakfast every day. Not many people do that. I'm guilty of not having breakfast every day. So props on that. So can you tell me a little bit about how you decided to become a house call vet or, specifically an in-home euthanasia vet and what your journey's been like so far?
Well, you know, I don't know if this happens to you or other people, but I'm like a big believer in weird fate stuff and opportunities presenting themselves. And sometimes it just seems like a whole bunch of things happen at once and they're like, poof,
Yeah.
and they take you in a direction. I mean, I went to vet school and it was kind of like that. It was like, had no intentions of doing it. And then the idea just materialized in my brain over the course of like a week. And then boom, I was on the path to vet school because of some serendipitous events in my life. So I was doing an ER vet on a relief basis, which I loved. And it was towards, what was it? April 2021. And pandemic, all that. Philadelphia, where I lived, was really shut down and it had gotten really depressing there. Most of my friends had left Philadelphia and I just felt like I didn't belong anymore. And one weekend, I think in April or May of 2021, I came to New York City and it was a beautiful day. And I went to like 4 different parties on roof decks. I saw so many old friends. Everybody, Philadelphia, everyone was like angry and depressed. And I came to New York and the pandemic hit New York so hard, and everyone was like, we got this. We're moving on with our lives. Everything's going to be great. And I had such a great weekend. And I went home and I'm like, what am I doing in Philadelphia? I don't know where it came up. Like, I had a dream about starting a home euthanasia practice or just doing it on the side for like, I've always liked euthanasia. Like, I've always, even in the ER, I enjoy kind of slowing down and helping people with that. And I was like, who is doing this in New York City? And I look it up and really not a lot of people. There's a couple house call vets that do it. Really, there was no exclusive in-home euthanasia provider in New York City. A lot of house call vets that had house call practice and also did home euthanasia. So all in the span of 1 week, I was like, I can move to New York City and start a business. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I was like, give myself a week to think about it because this is a really impulsive sort of decision. And then I was like, I'm doing it. And a week later, I set up to move to New York. And then I told Eve about it. And Eve was like, by the way, I am actually just finishing writing this. I think you were just finishing writing the course. And, I took your course and it was, I mean, I shouldn't curse. I was like, it was fucking awesome because you can curse. And I'm someone who will bootstrap stuff. Like, I'm not a planner. Like, everything goes into place. I just go and do. And so I was just like, oh, I'll do this. And I hadn't thought about the questions. And then Eve's course, your course like answered so many of just the little basic checklist questions to get off the ground, which is phenomenal because I would have just gotten off the ground and like sputtered and restarted. And it was just a roadmap for how to get started really simply in a straightforward way. And then I was just like, I'm doing this. And, about 6 months later, I launched earlier this year. So
I'm so proud of you and like thank you for saying that and just like so cool. I know you could have done it on your own. I know that, obviously. But it was just really exciting to be, in any capacity, like a part of your or, just kind of even witnessing the growth of your business kind of up close. It was just like so exciting. I was like, yes, Another my best friend in the house call world. This is so exciting. And so I'm just like super proud of you. You really hit the ground running. And like, I mean, at one point you said something like, I have more money than I know what to do with. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Well, I'm like you, where I think we're both pretty frugal people by nature, you know, and I mean, I we've gotten used to living on like nothing with vet school loans. So I'm like, yeah, I could live on $20,000 a year, not in New York, but
Right.
and so I'm like, well, I don't know what to do when I have more than that. Like, should I go get my nails done? I guess I'll get my nails done, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, like a whole nother level of life kind of open up with when you have your own business and you're controlling your finances so closely. And I think you had mentioned, well, actually, I was starting the Cozy Couch Vet Directory for traveling house call vet providers. And I was like, hey, I'm looking for a charitable cause. And you had mentioned something in New York that you had worked with. I think Paws New York. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, yeah. They help like elderly people just take care of their pets, like walk their dogs, get their dogs groomed and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was really inspiring to me, and I ended up making that one of the 3 sort of like, what's the word? Benefactors? Beneficiary? I don't know, the things that, the Cozy Couch Traveling Vet Directory contributes.
Awesome.
And then I know that you around that same time, you were also thinking about doing some sort of charitable component with your practice, kind of coming out of like you were like, "It's criminal how much I'm bringing in. How can I donate some of this?" And I was like, "That's beautiful." Like, did you end up doing that? Are you still kind of in progress of working that out? Or
I donate $10 of each case to Paws, you know, and I give them a monthly donation and I also provide them services, but they've only taken me up on my services one time. So
okay,
at
that's
a discount.
fantastic. Okay, that's amazing.
I mean, people really like charitable donations because then I tell every client that I gave to this organization. They look up the organization, then they write to me saying they found out about this awesome organization. They're going to volunteer for it. And they're so glad I gave money in Fluffy's honor. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's about helping, and when people see that, it's aligned with what they're looking for and what we want to give, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's very heartwarming. House calls are much more heartwarming.
I'm writing that down because I love it. House calls are much more heartwarming. Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I love that, and I feel that way myself as well. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for leading the way in that type of business decision. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'm sure your clients love to see it. I'm sure your business will thrive as a result, and you feel good, right? So congrats on that. I love it. You are practicing IHE in New York City. Can you tell me a little bit about the logistics of traveling around in New York City? And as you said, one of very few IHE only in New York City. What's that been like? What are the logistics like for you?
Well, that's like the question because when I started doing this, I'm like, I might be a veterinarian, but primarily this is a business of logistics. And house call has a lot of logistics as far as how do you get from one house call to another? How do you organize your house calls to make your day as efficient as possible? In my case, doing in-home euthanasia in New York City, there are some very unique challenges that don't apply. And I think this is partially why there's market opportunity here, because it's really not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of really annoying problems. Number one, where do I even park my car? It costs me almost $1,000 a month just to keep my practice vehicle near my home. I mean, that is what I was paying for my whole rent in Philadelphia. And that is just for my car to live there. You have to park at every location you get to. And in Manhattan, there's no parking. And I can either drive around for a long time and try to find a free spot. Sometimes that makes sense depending on the neighborhood. Or I can get a parking garage, which an hour of parking in lower Manhattan is usually somewhere between $20 and $40 for an hour. So it's a decision. Sometimes there's parking meters. It's usually about $8 to park in a meter for an hour. And those spots are a little harder to come by. So parking is a logistical challenge. Obviously, driving and how to organize your calls. Right now, I serve the 5 boroughs and Westchester County, which is the county of New York City. A couple of people have been like, "You're really stupid for doing all that driving." I kind of want to build the business in all of the areas because I'm hoping to have like some relief for me and have other vets potentially because I don't want to work 7 days a week. So potentially then like I can concentrate more in Manhattan. Someone else maybe can concentrate more in Brooklyn. And when people call you and they're in a really inconvenient area and they're like, yes, then I just say, okay. And like, I don't mind that much because I don't mind driving around. So organizing the calls so that I'm not going to Manhattan and then going to Brooklyn and then back to Manhattan and then back to Brooklyn, which happens from time to time. Like, that's dumb. Like, I recognize that I could probably see more calls if I organize them better. But so it's an interesting challenge. And then there's what you do with big dogs and how to get dogs out of high rises. Like, I was in a 50-story high rise apartment and had it was a 120-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback. And thankfully, I haven't encountered like 200+ pound dogs in high rises yet. I would like to be able to serve those clients. Like, my goal is to be able to do a good job for those people. But, you know, it was on this narrow alley and you couldn't park your car in front. You also don't want to be carrying a giant dead dog through an elevator building, when there's children on the elevator. So
Oh, yeah.
a lot of like really unique logistical challenge involving discretion and how you handle the patients respectfully and with discretion and respect for the other people who are living places, because then you've got it's hard. So it's interesting, like it's kind of scary, but they're interesting problems to solve. And when you solve them, you're like, yay, I did it.
Yeah, it's very satisfying kind of like solving these problems creatively. And I think in a lot of ways, that's the heart of the house call practice paradigm that you are kind of like on the fly, not in the clinic. How do we solve this unique problem? How do I do this while I'm in the home? Like, okay, what about with the high rise? Where do I park now? It's like a puzzle. And it's just so shocking how satisfying it is when you figure it out. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Little wins every day to be like, I figured out how to do this, you know?
No, it totally is. And it's interesting that you put it like a puzzle because I think, okay, there's these challenges and you can either, it's so much about your mindset. I can either be like, oh, this is going to be horrible. I don't want to do this. Or I can say, how can I uniquely solve this really weird problem that doesn't seem to have a solution, but I'm going to do it, and then see it as like a puzzle rather than as a inconvenience or like a nightmare or just an unsolvable problem. And I try to, when I start getting frustrated about something, I'm like, okay, how can I reframe this as an interesting problem to solve rather than as a nuisance?
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's sort of like growth mindset. Like, how do I take this and use it to my advantage? I mean, this is not toxic positivity. Everyone knows I talk about that constantly, but like, this is in your realm. You decide how you'd like to think about it, what benefits you, and how does it benefit you to think about what reframing and what mindset do you want to use? And I think for house call vets, like a successful house call vet, embracing a growth mindset and embracing little puzzles and enjoying almost like the MacGyverness of it. Like, I figured out how to get this dog out, like it's this like crazy little self-esteem thing that, I mean, they are life and death in your case, literally, but it's not like someone's going to die as a result of these little problems. Like, they're manageable and like it gets your brain juices flowing. And when you own your own business, you're really committed and it's exciting to solve these little problems. I found personally. Do you feel that way too, as in terms of like not just the logistics of the work, but when you're in the business itself, do you find that sort of same kind of enjoyable challenge of like, ooh, how do I troubleshoot this? How do I make my business a little better? How do I tweak it? Do you
Yeah, I do. I do in general like that aspect. And it's funny how much more you care because it's yours. And it's just weird being on this side of things and being like, oh, I've seen bosses like act that way. And I've never really understood why they were acting that way. And now I like sort of understand why. So I recently hired an assistant and I'm like, I'm so used to doing my own calls and I keep like looking at the texts and being like, and I'm like, Jessica, don't micromanage. Don't
Yeah.
let her deal with it. And I'm like, but I just want to see what they texted me. And it's not because I'm checking up on her. I like literally wanted to see what the client said. But I'm sure, like having been on her end, me just like poking in all day, like right? And feels like I'm trying to micromanage her. So I'm like, I turned my phone off today. I'm like, Joanna, you got the phones? Like, I'm on do not disturb. Like, I'm not answering my phones. If you've got to go off, she just had a baby and she's got a nurse. So I'm like, you have to go nurse, whatever. Call me if you need anything. So
Good. Yeah.
like, I'm free now.
Yeah, and I relate to that so much. Like, I don't want to be a micromanager. I hate being micromanaged. And, there's some things that when you own the practice, you have to have your hand on the pulse. That thing, like, you do have to make sure they're doing the right thing, that they're using the right words. They're not like driving traffic away. And like, there's some component of training, and it's like, oh, but am I going to really tell them how to speak? Like, am I going to tell them what words to use? And it's like, yeah, actually, on some level, like, it's good for the health of my business and it's good for that person to learn
Right.
as well. But like, there's a balance and it's hard. And like, I have the utmost respect, and I almost like can't believe that it's possible to be a full-on ethical boss of a ton of people in the industry we're in. Like, I don't know that I could ethically have a huge team of people and not infringe on their day-to-day quality of life with my goals, you know?
Totally. I feel you on that. I think the problem with really big hospitals with multiple levels of management or corporate hospitals is that they're not, and it's not the fault of the people at the top. They're not able to see the problems that are on the ground. And they can't, they just have no way of seeing the problems that are on the ground because they're just like day to day gossip or like someone says, well, this was annoying, you know? And also, when you are someone's boss, you care about them. Like you do, you care about your employees. And when you have a small business, everybody sort of cares about everybody because you know the person and you care about them. And like when directions are coming on high, it's a bunch of numbers, right? And so there's like, well, this is our budget for employment. So that's that. Like we can't pay people anymore. Whereas a lower level manager might be able to say, but they'll all leave if we don't pay them more. And then all the nurses leave. And it's like, well, now you have a much bigger problem on your hands simply because you weren't willing to pay people $1 an hour more, but they weren't able to see the problem because they're like way over here, you know?
Right, and it's not personal to them, so it's much easier to sort of, like, have that distance and, not really see people's whole lives. You see them as
Right. Like they're not the one having to have the conversation with the person saying, I'm sorry, like, I know you can't afford your rent, but like, I can't pay you anymore, you know?
right.
So,
That sort of replaceability factor at the bigger level, that people become replaceable, and it is interesting, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I've talked to you about the E-Myth Veterinarian. Have you read it at all?
yes.
Yay!
As I read it because it was a hospital I used to do overnights at, had it on their shelf, and I read it like 2 years ago. And I was like, this is so true. Like every veterinarian, and you see the temptation too, because I'm like, I could see more appointments. I've recently, oh, I probably shouldn't just jump into it in case people don't know what it is. But its book, its basic premise is like, stop doctoring so much so you can manage your business, but
Yes.
still know how to doctor. So I actually take Wednesdays off, and that's my management day. And it's
Right.
really hard to say no to appointments on Wednesdays because I'm like turning away revenue and I'm disappointing people. But I'm like, no, Wednesdays are like my big picture strategic
Yes.
day. And that's that.
Awesome. And so, yeah, I do the same thing. And like, there's just so many gems in that book for sure. And the reason I bring it up is that one of the things, like the really important tenets of that book is that, like, you want to train people as though they're replaceable. So you want basically, you want anyone to be able to step into that role and have the instructions and the directions to know exactly what to do. So it's not like, oh, someone left, it's the end of the world. However, I agree with that as a technique. However, I don't want, for me, what I don't like is when people actually are replaceable. It's like, I have a very, very connected rapport with my tech, and I see that you do too. You really care, and I think that caring component kind of goes away when you scale so much and like in the goal of, training people in a way such that they're replaceable, which is a good technique. They actually make people replaceable. And I think that's toxic. Just
Yeah.
if you're literally replaceable by anyone, who wants to work there? You spend most of your life working if you're a vet, right? Like you spend hours and hours you may see your work people more than you see your own family. And so if you feel replaceable to a place you go every day and give your all, like that feels terrible, you know?
Yeah. Well, and then it means you're just like a cog of the machine instead of a person, you know? Like, of course, it's good to have a good SOPs, good training documents. I
Right.
mean, it's important actually for the self esteem of the employees too. So many businesses hire someone, they want to get them right to work so they don't lose any money. So they train them for like half a day with someone who's been there for like a month. And then when they screw things up, they start yelling at them. And then they were never really trained. So I think some of the like replaceability thing is just like creating really good baby steps training documents to get people up to speed so that they, I mean, most people are capable of doing a good job at their job, any like, lower level job if they're trained properly. And if they're doing a bad job, it's probably management's fault, not their fault, you know?
Right.
Sometimes it's their fault, but but more times it's probably they weren't trained right.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least some component of that for sure. I mean, you passed all the tests to get into that place. You've had the interview, you've had the experience, like, and at that point, if you got the passion, you have the experience under your belt, and you have the desire to do a good job. Sometimes it's just a matter of like having the right training. You know. But anyway, it's an interesting subject, and I know we could talk about it all day long because, like, we are so passionate about these kinds of things and making sure that anyone under the umbrella of our business is taken care of, that they feel good, that we're a good boss to them, and they feel empowered and that they can experience growth too. And I think that's a really special thing about technicians who work for house call practices, like with a solo vet. Like, it's really you and them. And that's something really special that I think is hard to capture in a corporate environment or, a big, big environment. And of course, like, thank you to every specialist in a big hospital because I don't want to do it. Like, if someone's doing it, like, who else am I going to refer to? I don't want to do those things. So I'm beyond grateful for the people who are in that environment and working with the challenges of it. And in the meantime, Jess and I enjoy our little small batch house call practice lifestyle. Yeah. So I'm curious, you've mentioned a little bit about this, but I wanted to lean in a little bit more to any challenges that you face starting your IHE practice and any resources that you might like to share that you found helpful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were so many challenges. I'm sure you and everyone else who does this, like, spends nights losing sleep trying to, like, solve problems. My biggest problem, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, was where do you store dead bodies in Manhattan? Like,
Mm.
it's not an easy problem to solve. Most in home euthanasia vets store dead bodies at their homes, and it's just not possible. Like, it's just not possible. I would get kicked out of my apartment if I started bringing dead dogs in here. It would be really disrespectful to everyone in my apartment
Yeah.
to do that. And I don't have the space for a chest freezer. I have to take a tiny little elevator in an old building up to the seventh floor. Like, it's just not possible. So, and of course, I want my storage for the deceased patients to be sort of near to where I live. So I'm not driving an extra hour every day just to drop them off. So that was probably my biggest challenge, and finding something affordable that was ground level because like not everything's on ground level here. It's trying to carry big dogs up a bunch of stairs was just not going to be a reasonable option. And I was looking in the South Bronx, like really kind of industrial parts of the Bronx, but it was a half-hour drive. And I finally found something. It just worked out really well in Harlem. That's a tiny little office. I have a little desk there. I never use it, but if in the future I could use it. And I don't know what I would do if I didn't have that solution. Like, it all came down to that. My life would be so much more horrible if I didn't have a good office space. And most house call vets don't need space because they have a house where they can operate out of.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, I love that you kind of innovated and you figured it out. Like, genius. Like, I loved seeing that happen. I remember when you were kind of working through that, and it was just like, yes, you figured it out.
the other thing is you start telling people you want to lease their place to store dead animals there. And I had several realtors just ghost me. I was like, I'm a vet. I presented myself very professionally. I had my car. I'm like, I do house calls. And they're like, what are you going to be storing here exactly? And I was like, supplies. And they're like, what kind of supplies? Well, just some of my medical supplies and cadavers. And then they're like, fuck, no, we're not doing business with you. So the one I ended up getting actually was the closest to my house and the cheapest space. So it was just so fortuitous that the other places didn't work out because they were more expensive and further. They'd been having trouble renting this space out because it's in a really like not great neighborhood. And, I'm going to spray my logo on the door so it like looks a little more professional. And there's these drug dealers like who hang out outside my office and they're like, what do you got today? And I'm like, cat.
Oh my God.
I think you mentioned one time, like, they helped you bring in a big cadaver one time. You asked the folks on the corner to help.
Yes, this guy comes frequently now, and he won't accept any money. I think he just like is so his eye just bug out of his head. And he's like this little girl like carrying dead bodies every day. Like it's just cognitive dissonance for him. So he like loves helping me out. I try to sometimes he'll let me give him like $10 or something, but he helps me all the time with bigger pets.
That's amazing.
I know he's really nice. I was like, hey, what's up? I'm like, good. I got community relations here.
Amazing. I love that. And yeah, I love that you figured that out and like you have a little community of help and everything. And kind of on that note, you had recently shared a story in our group, in the Private House Call Vet Academy group, about euthanizing a pig. And I found it really moving. Could you share that story with us?
Oh, I wonder. I probably can't share his name because of
No,
medical.
don't. Yeah.
But so I get this call. This was the first patient that this guy actually helped me with. Me and my assistant could not together get this patient into the freezer by ourselves. It was two of us. And the pig was like 220 pounds. So I got this call from this woman in the Bronx who had a 12-year-old Vietnamese pot-bellied pig who was 200 something pounds and had fallen down and couldn't get up. It was the end. He was still eating fine because he's a pig.
Aw.
And I'm like, I mean, one of my philosophies is like my goal is to be able to build an infrastructure where maybe not me, but my business can help that person out when no one else can. And so I said yes. And I told her, I'm like, I don't do a lot of pigs, but we could help you and we could help get them cremated. And she was just so grateful. She'd called like 20 vets and no one would help her. They're like, we don't do pigs. We don't do pigs. And so I think I contacted one of our classmates, Amanda, and I asked her like any pitfalls, like any tips and tricks. And mostly I hear that pigs are kind of squeal a lot. So make sure you warn the owner when you give the IM injection and that you're going to need so much drugs because the absorption of the drugs may not be great. So you may end up like giving a whole lot of drugs and it does nothing and you have to give more. So I get to the house and he's not very nice. He doesn't like new people. He's screaming at me when he sees me. And I'm like, I'm just going to stay out of his line of vision. And then he was fine and he was eating great. Like she tells me that he spends his days like out in the yard eating pomegranates and stuff. He spends his summers like on a summer camp in Pennsylvania somewhere where he just eats like pomegranates or persimmons or something.
Oh.
And he spends his winters in this apartment in the Bronx where he used to go to a daycare and he was like the daycare pet, but he stopped going to the daycare. Stopped allowing him to go to the daycare. So he ate everything. And she tells me that his favorite food is beer. And I'm like, well, why don't we let him get as drunk as he likes for this?
Aw.
And so he drank like 3 Coronas or something during the whole euthanasia process. And so it worked out really well. I don't remember what I gave him exactly. I think I just used what I normally use, acetylazole torb IM. And he fell asleep over about 20 minutes. It was a large volume. He didn't even feel it. He was just drinking beer and he didn't feel it. And I think maybe it had something to do with the fact that he was down and maybe didn't have a lot of feeling sort of towards his hindquarters where I gave him the injection.
Yeah.
And then I was like, as he's getting sedated, I'm like, I still don't know where I'm going to put the euthanasia solution. Like, I'm not going to be able to find a vein on this thing. I just used a long needle somewhere near the heart. And it worked like that. So it should not have gone smoothly. I was not prepared. I just was like, I'm going to go in and wing this. And it worked out well. So
Amazing. That's wow. Okay. So it was like a good death for the piggy.
it was he ate all these kinds of strawberries and drank a whole bunch of beer. And then we took him away. The family was beautiful. They loved him so much. She texted me the next day to tell her like her elderly father was like really mourning. And so I was like, maybe he needs to go to the AMC pet support group because they have a Zoom support group, AMC. And so I think he went to that. He loved the pig. They loved the pig so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That story that you told, I actually heard the story of this pig on another podcast interview that you did a few weeks ago. And I was like crying when you told this story. Like, I don't know, like something about the strawberries and and I don't know, like the Coronas, like I don't know, something about it was just like so sweet. And yeah, thank you for sharing that story here. And I think that's what it's all about. These like beautiful experiences and interesting unusual experiences. Like you can never get bored as a house call vet, even if you're doing only euthanasia. Like it's always something interesting and inspiring and challenging, always, right?
It is. I think that's probably why it doesn't attract everybody is because if you have a mindset that you're going to get frustrated by roadblocks and things, and rather than be like, oh, this is an interesting difference, then it might not be for you. Like if you need things to be the same every time, like, got like that surgeon mentality where you're like, this instrument is slightly different. I'm really mad about it. That's the problem.
Oh,
You're
God.
adaptable and like okay with slowing down a little bit. And you know,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do think slowing down a little bit is definitely a part of the house call mentality. Like slowing down, being okay with a little bit more than, I don't know. In the clinic, in brick and mortar, things are a little bit more in the box thinking, is what I would say. Like a little bit more rigid thinking, like we're not encouraged to get creative about fixing our patients. We're not encouraged to get creative about connecting with our clients or even how to take back control of our lives. We're not encouraged to be creative, to not burn out, even.
no, and in fact, creativity is discouraged. You do something weird and you might hear from someone, why did you do that? Like,
Right,
and there might have been a perfectly good reason for it.
right, right.
I struggle with the slowing down part, as you know, Eve. I'm kind of like, go, go, go.
Well, you're a New Yorker now. I mean, you're initially from New York, right?
Well, not as much of a New Yorker as you are,
Okay.
but, Westchester County, North.
Yeah, yeah, and for folks who aren't listening, I am originally from the Bronx in New York, and I know I'm not a classic New York person. Like Jess has more New York in her soul than I do. I'll just say that right now. Like I'm a California girl at heart, even though I'm not from California. So I see you as like you are New York. You are like a perfect New York girl. And when you moved there, I was like, yeah, that's gonna work out.
So funny.
Yeah. And so, kind of on the subject of like thinking outside the box and creatively working with clients, I know we've had so many conversations. I know you're really passionate about how you care for clients and how you allow them to make the decisions that feel right for them and you hold space for them and like you don't make people wrong, like you allow people to feel what they need to feel and you have a really special way in my opinion of making people feel heard and safe and comfortable, particularly as a veterinarian. Some of the stories you told me about how you do that in the ER, how you speak to people, and also in your IHE practice. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what that all means to you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really never considered myself much of that sort of person until I was doing a lot of ER work and then found clients opening up to me a little bit like, well, this other vet was really mean to me. And you're telling me that I can do this other thing. And I was like, why was somebody mean to you? And maybe they weren't meaning to me, but I mean, a lot of people are just very road and like, they don't emote as much as I do or,
And
feel a little bit colder. And so I've always felt like since working in the ER that just like being warm towards people was really, really an important part of my practice. And even if they were being rude or mean, I mean, there's so much. I mean, I feel a little bad saying this a little because there's so much in veterinary, so much abuse from clients in veterinary medicine right now. But like my strategy of dealing with like client abuse is like with problem solving to try to gamify it a little bit and say, okay, this person's upset at me or upset at my hospital or upset about something right now. And it's borderline anger. Like, how can I turn their emotions around? Because naturally, what I want to do is like argue back with them. Like, as you know, I can be argumentative. Like, you know, so like, it's almost like my naturally thing is to argue with them and be like, no, you're wrong. And I'm like, wait a second, no, we don't win by me winning this argument. We win when they trust me and I can get them to trust me. And how can I do that? So, and going into people's homes, as you know, is like all about trust. They open up to you.
yeah,
People tell you random, really personal shit when you go into their
yeah,
homes
yeah.
and just sort of like listening and not, I don't know, you don't have to say anything, like just listen to them. And
Trust is there. The trust is there just by the nature of the service we're offering and by the fact that we're in their home and they have time. It's not a 15-minute boom, boom in a sterile cold office. It's so much more personal. So, yeah, just inherently, people are more trusting and they tend to be less angry as a rule, in my experience, to begin with. But
I think so. Thankfully, I have not encountered like scariness. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's out there, but most of the time people are lovely. Sometimes they're on edge, like
yeah,
especially in euthanasia, they're really on edge. But yeah, that's just I don't know. It's just like just be nice to them no matter what. That's kind of my philosophy. And I really feel that when you have clients that are being total jerks, that if you just keep being nice to them, most of the time they turn around and like sometimes they apologize to you for being a jerk. Whereas if you start to be like, hey, you can't treat me like that, it turns into a fight, even though they shouldn't be treating you like that. And you're right to say that. It doesn't work as well as being like, what are they angry about? And how can I fix their problem? Because like we don't really hate each other. We just are having this conflict right now.
yeah,
And like I said, there's not a lot of conflict in house calls usually, but
right.
I don't know, just acknowledging people's emotions and being nice. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Telling them that their feelings are okay. That it
yeah,
and a lot of times their feelings aren't straightforward either. They're like
right.
anger and guilt and
Totally. I think that's really, really important to validate people's feelings. I think it's important to validate our clients' feelings. It's important to also validate our own feelings too, even, like within our profession, peer to peer. I see a lot of invalidating. That's not what you're saying. I find it interesting because when I'm in the clinic, I'm much more in that gamifying, how do I make the client happy? Because I'm not the boss, I can't fire them. I have
Uh-huh.
a choice. And I can make anyone happy. I'm a natural people pleaser. I can do that till I'm blue in face. I will win that game hardcore. I can kill anyone with kindness if I need to. I have no
Yeah.
problem. And what's interesting is in my house call practice, as you've kind of corroborated, people seem to be a lot less prone to being angry. And I found when people come at me with something that doesn't feel right, it's them in my experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, can I layer it on? Can I kill you with kindness? Abso-freaking-lutely, but do I want to at this point? So I'm coming at a little bit of a different place, and I respect your opinion 100%, and I do it myself that way. And for me, I've just kind of like over it. If someone's gonna come at me that way, and I'm gonna have to work extra hard to be fake, or I'm gonna have to problem solve with a client who's a repeat client for me, and I'm gonna just put them over and over again, and they continue to have a personality trait that is just provides more work for me. I don't tolerate it anymore. But there are times if someone has a legitimate complaint, like I didn't provide what I said I would provide, or, someone has a complex emotion and there's someone that means a lot to me. They've become a friend at this point. If they, of course, I'll like put forth an effort to, gamify and solve their problem and, not only kill them with kindness, but to model kindness. This is how I'd like to be treated. And I'm going to help you through this. And I'd like you to respond in kind.
Yeah.
And of course, like I don't give up on everyone. But I found like if I've given everything I've got and people know my boundaries, they know my rules, they know that I'm giving all I can and they're still angry at me within the boundaries of my house call practice that I work so hard to treat everyone kindly and give and give and give. If they are still acting entitled or they're angry in the face of that, I'm like, F that. That's my boundary. But, like, in the ER, you're dealing with people you don't know who are just you don't have a rapport. You haven't had a chance to give them someone to trust. They have no idea who they're dealing with. They're scared, they're freaked out, and I think in the ER, that mentality is just so gold, so much gold.
Yeah, but you add some nuance to it with what you
Right.
say too, because there are limits to it. And sometimes if you are too nice, you actually end up in a worse situation because people walk all over you and you give too much and then you can't give anymore and then they're mad. Like if I say I want to do it this way and they're like, I want to do it this way and I'm not comfortable with that and I say yes to it, I almost always regret it because then something goes wrong and then they're unhappy because I gave when I shouldn't have given. So there's definitely some nuance to it. And there's also the difference, when you have repeat clients, like my sole goal, look, I'm gonna leave their house. And other than the first few patients I did and very, very special ones, I mean, it pains me to say this. I am going to forget their pets, right? Like I'm going to forget them. I'm going to forget their pets. They will remember that moment for the rest of their lives. So yes, even if it means it's inconveniencing me somewhat and not great for me, I want it to feel good. People tell stories all the time of these tiny little things that happened in the euthanasia of their last pets that just hung in their brain for years, and they're living with this guilt because like the head flopped to the side, or like there was like a little twitch that they weren't prepared for. So it's just so important that there's this control over everything. And so, like, I am a little more tolerant than if I had repeat clients. Absolutely not, and you've got this, you don't have to take that shit, like
Right.
nobody's ever mean to me anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you set up your clients for success with how you communicate with them. Like, it's clear to me, like, just hearing the stories you tell of how, like, various client interactions that you make people feel safe. Like, why would they be mad? You don't give them anything to be mad about. And I think that's really cool. And kind of going a little bit more into the personal experience in the home with the individual clients and how everyone's kind of different. They're going through different things. I know you've done some really interesting research and thinking about spirituality and ceremony and how death is processed in various cultures. Like, you're a history major, so of course you would be thinking about these things. And I find that so interesting. And I want to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on, kind of spirituality in general, spirituality in relation to IHE. And I know also that we've talked about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead for beginners. You've told me about that book, and I cannot wait to read it because it's so my style. I have the Tibetan Book of the Dead in my house, and I've like read a few pages, but I never like kind of got all the way through it. But I need to read that damn book because, for God's sake, like, and I also know, like, you recently told me you just like read through the Bible, and like as not necessarily a religious person, just as like what is in this book. You really,
yeah, that was like the end of age 20 when I was really depressed. I don't know, we were all really depressed.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm like, I'm just going to read the Bible. And there was a podcast. It was like a couple chapters every day. So I listened to the podcast and read it along. And the end of the podcast kind of explained a little bit. So I don't know that I could just cover to cover. But yeah, I mean, I was somebody who was raised as a Catholic and then completely rejected religion from as soon as I possibly could. And like, well, this is dumb, like, because I'm a smart ass child. And then realized I was like, wait a second, like, there's actually a lot of wisdom to be offered here. Like, even if you don't believe in the literal every single words, and it's like, it's not meant to be read. I mean, some people read it literally, but I don't think it's meant to be read in absolute literal sense. Wow. So this is a big topic.
I just asked you. I was like, brain dump on spirituality and IHE. Go.
uh, yeah, I mean, you encounter so many different conceptions of death. I was going to read you a passage.
Please.
So, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Morty Levine, the author of the beginner's version of it, who I think you should be friends with. He lives in San Diego. He said, like, you can't really just read the Tibetan Book of the Dead because it's just such a different cultural, historical context that, like, a random American without like a background in extensive courses on that part of the world is going to struggle with it and not really understand it, even if you do read it.
Right.
But, his book in the preface says, in most of Western cultures, the topic of death comes in hushed voices. We shield ourselves and our children from any meaningful discussion of death. Death is feared, and speaking of it creates discomfort. It is rarely discussed openly. In Eastern cultures, senior citizens live within the community and within the home of their family. As they age, they are respected, supported, and still part of the community and family fabric. They live at home and they die at home in the bosom of their family and community. And it just, I don't know. The discussions about euthanasia are mostly our guilt. Like, people are not ready to give up on their animals. Death is like the end. It's the end. It's the end. They're losing what they love. And it's just, get it away from me. It's horrible. Put them in the hospital and then let them die. I mean, how many animals die in the hospital? It's horrible. They shouldn't die there. And I think it's this fear of death. And I come to really enjoy being like, it's okay. Like, your animal is going to die. And the best thing we can do for them is just say, let go. Like, just let go. It's okay. It's coming. let's make it beautiful and let's make it a part of life with family and love. And I don't know, I tell people a lot, like, it's okay to let go. And you can almost see the relief, like wash the
I just got chills hearing that. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just this book was super cool because it talks about that. And also the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about, I mean, they have some spiritual beliefs that I don't necessarily subscribe to, that what happens to the soul afterwards, you go to this place called Bardo and like, but they say the state of your mind at the time of death is really crucial to what happens after death. And anyone who does euthanasia knows if the owners are crying and like panicking and crazy, the animal that you're euthanizing is upset. And not because they're dying, they're upset because their owner's upset. And you'll see these dogs start licking their owner in the face because they're like trying, as they're getting euthanized, because they're trying to comfort their owner. So I actually tell people when they're like, what should I do? I'm like, the best thing you can do is be calm and present for your animal. Like, it is really hard, but just be there and like exude like love and calmness. And I felt weird saying that to people at first, but I think it works. Like, and then it's calmer. It's calmer,
Hmm.
and better.
That's so interesting and so beautiful. And I think that being present is really therapeutic for people in their own experience, for the animal, and then also in the grieving process afterwards, that they were there. They were fully, wholly there with their whole self and leading with love. And I think in a moment of crisis like that, and it is a crisis for people in these moments, to have someone literally say to them, just being present and feeling your love for this animal, it's so important and therapeutic. And just like, I mean, we all know that we're all kind of social workers and therapists as veterinarians. And I wish we could do it more. And I think that at the moment of death, that is where we have so much influence on the state of mind of people in that moment. And I think that's so beautiful, that just that simple idea, be present, just be here in this moment, feel it. You know, they always say you have to feel it to heal it. If you've sort of numbed yourself
Like
to
that.
that experience, you're not present, you're in your head, you're not with it, it's gonna be so much harder to heal that wound over time through the grief. So that's really beautiful that you tell
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
that's great. And it's a funny thing that you say that we're all sort of social workers. 'Cause sometimes I'm like, am I overstepping my bounds by giving this sort of advice, or am I within the bounds of what I can do? Because honestly, I'm like, I need to go take classes in this, in social work, or in grieving and death. I thought about like trying to become a death doula. I
Yeah.
don't know if that sort of training would be helpful at all, but there's so much that I don't know, and I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. So
Oh,
what am I doing? A spiritual guide now. Who knew?
yeah, I mean, I think you have to be. You have to be a spiritual guide. You have to be a death doula. If you're doing IHE, if you're doing any one single euthanasia anywhere, even in the clinic, you have to bring your whole self to that. You have to bring your humanity. You have to bring your intuitive comforting of that person and your intuitive knowledge of grief. And like, we're in such a unique position to understand what it means to lose an animal as veterinarians. And like, I've thought so many times, like, I need to become a social worker because I need to make sure I'm doing it right. You know, like we all are. We all are doing that work of handling grief and complex grief sometimes. And like the moment of like taking the life and making a decision, like talking people through living with making a decision like that is fucking heavy. You know, like it's unbelievable to me in retrospect that we didn't learn on a psychological level how to handle that in vet school, you know?
I know. I mean, I look back to some of the first euthanasias I did, and I'm like,
Uh,
what was I doing? Like, I can't, it was horrible. It was really horrible. Poor people. The animals did fine ultimately, but the people,
Yeah. And probably in your own memory, it's worse than it ever was to the person, but you know?
I mean, I don't know. It probably was horrible to the person because their mind is so, your memory is so strong when you're in those highly emotionally charged moments. Like you
Every
remember,
detail matters. Yeah.
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 But your thing about being present applies to us as well. And I think that it's much easier to be present in house call practice
It is.
and in the office where you're like, what do I have to do next? What do I have to do next?
Yes.
And like, I was a little worried when I started doing in-home euthanasia that it was gonna, and sorry to derail this a little
Oh,
bit,
no. Good. Good.
that, I'm like, am I gonna be able to handle this? Or am I just gonna get depressed?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's fucked up because when I'm there, I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm just there. I'm like, sometimes I say little mantras and things to bring myself back. Sometimes I'm talking to the clients if they want to talk. Sometimes they want to talk, but I'm there, And then I leave it, and even though there was all this emotion, sometimes I'll cry. I try not to cry with them, but I'll get teary eyed a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't, because if I'm like someone who, if I really start crying, I'll start like ugly crying. So
Yeah.
try not to.
Me
It's not
too.
really. Like, I cry hard with my clients.
Yeah.
But then I leave and I'm like, oh, I feel recharged after a euthanasia, which sounds bizarrely fucked up, but I think it is that being present. This is a really important thing that's happening in an animal's life right now and in their life. This event happens once in a lifetime. And so there's something oddly recharging where I don't finish my days like I used to, where I'm like drained and just need to go home and have a drink. I'm like,
Yeah.
feel like my day was good. Like I helped people.
I mean, it's really beautiful that you say that. And you're not alone in that. It's not fucked up at all. I hear that actually over and over and over again from people who practice IHE and, folks who are cut out for it, obviously. Like, I'm not cut out for that. I'm just going to give you another side story and then come back. Like you said, like the ugly crying, I cry every time I euthanize a patient of mine. Well, first of all, because all of my patients that I euthanize I feel them as my own. Because I know my patients as a concierge vet, and I used to, but I'm not doing IHE for any animals that I don't already have a rapport with. So they're all personal.
Yeah.
And to me, it's literally a loss in my own life, But second of all, I'm an ugly crier too. And like before I became a vet, like one of the first times I ever shadowed in a vet office, I witnessed a euthanasia. And I started crying so hard that I had to leave the room because I was crying harder than the owner. And I was like, I don't think I can be a vet. I can't do this. Like, how am I going to do this? And that was my back for years to be like, if I have to euthanize animals and I'm not going to be able to do it. And I somehow took the leap. I was like, well, I'm going to go into wildlife. And maybe it turns out you have to euthanize more in wildlife. But like, I don't know, I somehow like
The only thing you do for them is euthanize them.
I know. And I somehow like talked myself out of it and I got into vet school and just did it anyway. But I still even cry for almost every euthanasia I do. And it's involuntary because that's my physiology, right? Not because I care more than anyone else. It's just that's how I handle my emotions. Tears. I'm angry, tears. Sad, tears. Frustrated, tears. Like that's how I am. And it goes full force. Once I start crying, I can't stop. So I like totally get that. And I did a poll once because I was so worried about it. I asked, I don't know, like 50 to 100 of my friends who are animal owners. I was like, what if you had a vet euthanize your animal and they're crying their eyes out? Every single person was like, that would mean so much to me. That would mean so much to me to know how much they cared and that they were with me feeling it. And from then on, I was like, okay, I'll make myself cry more. This is great. I was like, I'm not crying. What's wrong? And throw some water in my eyes. Like
That's so funny. That's so funny.
yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, the crying, like I want to encourage you that if you feel tears are going to come, just like let them because it's going to mean a lot to people. As long as you can like carry on and still focus.
Yeah, that's my worry is that I might not be able to carry that.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is that it makes total sense. Like you're not causing the suffering, you're taking the suffering away. You're here in this most meaningful, precious moment. And like it's kind of rare in our lives here in the US, especially New York, fast paced. We have goals, we have chop, this and that. And, go here, go there, do this, do that. And like, I know that in your life, like you just said, earlier in the podcast, that's kind of your MO, even that you're like, get things done and move fast. And so, like, what a special time that not only are you allowed, but it is your job to slow the hell down, be present, give everything. This is like a soul connection thing, like you've probably heard this, like, we can't search for happiness directly because you'll never find happiness if you're searching for happiness. But if we search for meaning, then happiness comes or fulfillment comes. And fulfillment is not the same as happiness either. But I see it, like, I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like deep fulfillment, giving to the best of your ability, and almost like a self-actualizing, which is my new favorite word in the entire universe, because you can give it from like, you bring your emotion, your spirituality, your physical self, your talent, your skills, your knowledge, your caring, your empathy, everything. Like it brings everything you are into that moment to do something that is more meaningful to that family than almost anything else we can do as vets. So it's just really beautiful. And I know people often say, I don't know, maybe something's wrong with me, but I love it. I feel good. I feel happy and recharged. Like, yeah, that's why,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
So meaningful, like, right. Of all the things we do in our life, it's definitely, yeah. Yeah. And that I like your thing about happiness. I think it's one of the central problems of philosophy that no one ever achieves happiness by striving directly for it. Like elusive.
Yeah, you can't hit the target by aiming for the target. You have to go around a little bit. You got to be squirrely with it.
Squirrely.
Squirrely.
Squirrely theory of happiness.
The squirrel theory of happiness. Oh my God. Okay. That might be the name of this episode. We'll see. But thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experiences and always your authenticity and integrity. I love that about you as always. And I wanted to close by asking if there's any advice or wisdom you'd like to share with vets in general or house call vets or maybe folks thinking about starting IHE practice. Like, what would you recommend or what are your thoughts that you'd like to share with them?
I would say that you can do it. Like whatever you want to do, you just got to jump off into the deep end and do it and drown for a while, but you'll drown less if you take your course.
Thank you. It's good to drown less, isn't it?
Like a little bit of something to hold on to might be helpful.
Awesome. Any other closing words that you'd like to say?
No, your podcast is awesome. It's definitely one of my go-tos in my 4 hours driving that I do every day. So I'm very happy to have it for that reason. But yeah. And thank you for having me on. It was so great talking to you. I love your plans.
Thank you. And then one final question, since we are in the House Call Vet Cafe, what is your favorite tea, coffee, booze? What is your favorite beverage to drink?
My favorite beverage drink. So, oh gosh. So lately I've been drinking coconut water, but it's kind of expensive. So Goya makes coconut water and it's better. It's got coconut chunks in it and it's way cheaper than the other types of coconut water. Like
Good to
Goya.
know. Oh, cool. Okay, I'll check out the Goya coconut water. I'm a fan of
My
it.
favorite beverage is probably red wine though.
All right. I'm a Malbec kind of girl. Do you know what kind of?
I like Malbec, like a dry red wine. The Argentinian and Chilean wine's really good.
It sure is. All right, Jess, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Rock. It was so great to chat with you on the podcast, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.